Hi guys. So now that the Kwanzaa is over and done and in the can, so to speak, I can turn my mind slightly to other things, preferably, um, because I found out, for one, that doing the Kwanzaa really took up a lot of my headspace for some reason. I haven't done any painting, I haven't done any other activities other than what you've seen, really. I thought it was a brilliant exercise. It was a brilliant set of exercises, really. And it's provided me with a bit more insight. I mean, I know I did a sort of a wrap up yesterday, but I suppose that you can add to that um, at least one larger conclusion that has come to me from these spreads and these draws is that um, a lot of stuff has happened to me, yes, but it is all okay, and I can still, or maybe I can start functioning now as as part of a community, and it is especially beautiful to me, um, this aspect of the whole Kwanzaa, um, the approach, the way things are presented, the questions that are asked, and the whole mindset that's really presented to you, the whole thought, um, the whole philosophy. Let's put it that way. Is It's really much more oriented towards being part of a community, and it assumes all the time that you are part of a community no matter what. And so that's really quite extraordinary to me. And I've had, from the cards that I've drawn, I've had such a lot of positive, imagery, positive feedback, positive input, really, that I was actually quite, pleasantly surprised that I am, you know, much more than I've ever been aware, part of some form of togetherness in all sorts of on all sorts of levels, with close relatives, but also in a larger frame. It turns out I am human after all, which is a great relief. So, having said that, that's of course my broadest conclusion from the totality of those spreads, and it turns out that I have had um, a great deal of, a great deal of my life has been spent in a state of denial about this, and about that the fact that it caused me pain. I was in no way capable of living other than by my mother's side, or after that, after she passed away, by the side of some other strong-minded, strong-willed individual or group of individuals. I'm thinking of my workplace where I used to work for a while, for a couple of years, and I'm thinking also of my husband, in a state myself of really largely um, dependency, um, almost a state of having no willpower, and a state of fragmentation generally. So I have been confronted with this state of affairs for over a couple of years now, in several different ways, and it's become more or less a state of affairs that I have accepted as being in the past. Okay, I do not live like that anymore, but a part of my mindset, a part of the way I think, still tends to look for the comfort that I used to find in particular activities, or particular thought processes, or places even that I used to go in my mind, that made me feel better or made me feel at ease in some way. And now I have to do it all by myself. I have to do it now. I have to be, grounded and happy ish to some extent. Be balanced, be in a state of general, I don't know, being okay with myself. I have to be in a state of acceptance nowadays because I tell myself to, because I don't know why, really. I don't feel unhappy. I don't feel uncomfortable, I think, except that there's always more going on. And that's basically more or less what keeps hitting me, is that there's always, at some point, there's going to be a surprise of some sort. And that's, of course, everybody's, everybody's in that type of situation. I feel like this card here, oh my goodness, and there's this darkness in the middle, and I don't know what to do about that. That's really why I am, also fiddling with this beautiful new crystal that I bought. It is called a Code Keeper of Freedom. Doesn't that just sound fabulous? It's also quite a potent, light energy worker. So I have to kind of handle it for a bit and then I put it aside again. I love it, but it's, it's a bit of a massive, like this massive sound that you can have sometimes, like an organ, that type, a church organ, that type of thing. One direct reason why I'm being a bit of being like this is I had another telephone conversation with my foster mum last Friday, and we weren't done with Kwanzaa yet and all that, so it was like everything on top of everything else, and a couple of other activities that we were busy with, and just general busyness, and yeah. So it turns out, here she goes again, that now when I speak with my foster mum, and contrary to the previous conversations I've had with her so far, which has only been a couple, I can't remember whether it's 3 or 4 times, but I believe this is the 4th time that we speak over the telephone, because she lives about 1,000 kilometers away from here, so it's not like I can hop on the bus. It turns out I feel connected to her now. And that kind of came to me Friday evening after that, a long time after that conversation. We had been outside for a walk in the dark, and I was quite cold, and I had, I don't know if you call that heart palpitations or something like that. I don't normally have that type of thing, but I was like this and shivering a bit, and I was in my bed and I was completely bundled up in blankets and stuff, and I was still cold. And at some point I realized that it wasn't only because I was cold from being outside and because the room hadn't been heated and so on. I turned on the heater, I went out of bed, I turned on the heater, and just, generally I should have made myself another cup of tea, I suppose. I didn't even think of that. I was so struck by the fact that I could actually feel something for this woman whom I haven't seen or had a relationship with, whatever, that means, haven't been in contact with for 44 years. So here she is, here I am, and it turns out we can actually be friends. And I was kind of really strongly reminded of the way I used to be with her when I was a kid. I was 7 years old at the time, and I spent about 5 months or so, 6 months maybe, in their home. And she not only looked after me out of a sense of, I don't know, duty or obligation, or an obligation to my grandparents that she'd known for quite a large part of her life. She looked out for me because she cared about me. And Of course I responded to that. Of course I liked that. Of course. But I hadn't given it another thought, because the moment that my mother showed up again and took me away from there, I had to conform to her rules again. And I sit here talking to the camera, I look like a ghost, I look all white, and there isn't even any snow out there. It's just it's cloudy, and it's the way the light works at the moment. It's just the way it is. I remember that when my mother showed up, I went inside. I went, oh no, that's her again. Because all I remembered from her presence and from both my parents' presence was stress and fear and anxiety and unsettledness, and us having to, move around the whole time, and people generally being nasty to each other, and it being very uncomfortable. And I'd gotten used to the sense of comfort that I got in the other house, in the foster home, I suppose. I'm not going to blame myself for those things. However, because I feel that now, at this moment, I've only gotten to these realizations and to this emotional closeness, even to this clarity, through this immensely long and convoluted process of my soul retrieval and all the rest of it. I find it really hard to understand at this point what I should be doing about any of this, and in particular how to not come to the conclusion that the whole soul retrieval story was really some sort of a psychological gimmick that I unearthed through this, in this process, and that all that really happened was for me to get access, to gain access again to my own emotional life the way it should be, which is fine. I mean, that part of it I am really grateful for. So there's no other way for it to be than for me to be grateful. I'm still kind of struggling with the opposition, with the, there's a part of me, nowadays there's a grown-up part of me that wants to belong-ish, to the extent that that's possible, with my real birth parents. Because they have given me a number of things, and through them and through their presence, and especially through my mother's presence, I have learned so much that I would never have learned otherwise. The pressure, there was a point to the pressure, but I find that so hard to accept. I find that so hard to live with, even. At some point, yesterday morning early, I had a rather an interesting dream. I dreamed I was in Geneva, in Switzerland, and it was really very beautifully sunny weather, and like the month of May or June or something. And I was in some form of a garden or a park by a big white house, and there were trees and grass, lawns, and all very well tended, and like some kind of what you see on TV when there's when you're at an embassy or some such a place, really fancy place. And in the garden of this building, of this house, I suppose quite close by the house, was a group of statues that, in my dream, my father had made. There was a figure of a woman, all in marble or some such material, very shiny and bright, and very stony and cold also. A woman who looked like my mother in a very young version, about 30 years old or so. Behind her were two goats, a young one and an adult one. And on slightly to the side of that, there was a young horse as well behind her. So 3 animals behind her. The whole thing was surrounded by a low wall, also in the same white stone. and there was a couple of steps down one side, and there was a little figure in the same white stone of a girl child, about 6 years old, believe it or not, and behind her, laying down on the side of this kind of a hillock where the whole operation was taking place, was a tiger, a figure of a large tiger. And to the front, everybody was facing the same way, the animals and the people were facing the same way, and in front of them was sort of some impression. I don't really remember any clear definition of that. An impression of a almost half-formed figure of the sculptor, my father, sitting there, or kneeling there somehow. And I woke up from this, okay, it makes a lot of sense, because those animals, and they really show that my father was what he has created in my brain, that I have dreamed. It was so real, you guys. It was incredible. What he had created was his image, and his it was like a reflection of his needs and all that. And I was only on the side. I was the little girl child, of course, and I was on the side, and it looked like I was protected very well by this tiger figure. My mother's totem animals, if that's what they were, at least they represented. I had to talk about this with my husband, because he actually made sense of the animals. He said goats are really headstrong, and the old goat and the mature goat, the adult animal, and the young horse, they would be like functions where your mother would be working for your father. Isn't it extraordinary? I thought it was a really nice dream to have, because it was quite peaceful otherwise, and I was just walking around, and I suppose I spent a couple of, I don't know, there were more dreams and there were more activities, and I kept coming back to this location the whole time. So I spent half the morning in a state of, amazement, really, at how clear and almost like perfect this image was. And it just comes out of me in my dream. I was sleeping very deeply, which I can recommend to anybody, I think. I obviously needed that dream very badly, and it links up with everything else for me. And basically that's the reason that I am making this vlog at the moment, because that's my bread. My bread is done. Bear with for 1 second. Yes, my bread is done. It smells beautiful. So I would say it all hangs together. My deeper impressions of this childhood emotion that I shared with this woman, and I have never thought of it ever since, because when you're 7 and 8 and 9 years old, you do not really evaluate things, I suppose. I did try to contact, I remember that I tried to remember certain things, sort of, at later places where we used to live, because after that time where my mother kidnapped me from the school I was at the time, we moved several more times. I don't know, about 4 or 5 times or so, before moving to the south of Spain. So this was all taking place within the Netherlands. And we stayed with one family, and then we stayed in a basement little place that she had rented somehow. And then we went off to another little, very dingy little house-ish place. I don't know. Very almost falling apart, really. I have actually got a couple of nice memories from those places, but my mother was so unpredictable. Oh my God. Anyway, there were things that were difficult for both of us. And one thing was that I remember, that I'm reminded of now talking about this, was that I had left my arithmetics at school to, I just abandoned that. And at some point it showed up, my mother got told by a teacher, I suppose, that I hadn't done any arithmetics, and she was so mad at me. That's, I was frozen in fear. My mother has never been able to deal with that and or help me. I don't know. I hope this isn't triggering the daylights out of you guys. If it does, there's a reason for that as well. And maybe I just should, carry on being brave, talking about this stuff. Because there's other people out there. There's tons of people out there whose parents have not done the right thing. There was no need to treat me like that. And okay, I could be a bit stubborn, I could be a bit, but there was no reason to use. I mean, she hit me now and then, not often, and it would be more like a slap. But that wasn't it. That wasn't really why I was so scared of her, I think. She had this power over me. She could just, I was like putty in her hands. I had no personality whatever. I had no capacity to make any, to do or say anything that made any difference ever. So I've turned to astrology again and again because, I want to know why people do stuff and why people talk the way they do, and why she got so upset with me when I wasn't a threat to her in the slightest. But she had been frightened out of her wits again and again, and she obviously, she didn't have a clue in heaven or hell what she was doing. And here she was, being a Taurus with a moon in Leo, Mercury in Aries, ascendant Taurus, if that means anything to you, being very self-assured and very confident and quite, quite a handsome looking woman. She was hiding it really well, that she didn't make a head or tail of any of it. She couldn't live. Poor cow. So all this had to come out today again. And I've got cards and I've got crystals, and I haven't got my mum anymore. And the more time passes, and the more I work on things, and the more I try to realize things and have my own back, basically, have my own, look after my own heart. That's what I try to do. I try to work as little as possible with energy tools like this beautiful crystal here. Or, I could wear a rose quartz. If I do that within a couple of hours, I will feel much better. I can do that. But I tend not to, because I would rather it sorts itself out, if you know what I mean. I would rather it does itself. I have a deep trust in the mechanisms that they will eventually, pain has to be felt. I do not want to drug myself using a rose quartz or any other tool like that. So that's the truth of it, really. And it makes for quite a confusing life. It makes for a life where I feel also like I am so utterly fed up with living in the past the whole time. And that was my match, my lighter, because I have to, light some type of fiery brightness now, which I'm going to try and... It looks better, doesn't it? It looks a bit more rosy. Yeah, I miss the sun. And they were saying that there might be a bit of snow later this week, like here and there, a smidge of snow. And I was watching with mouth agape the German news, I don't know, a couple of days ago. And the south of Germany is covered in yay high in snow, and Austria and all the rest of it. And we don't get any. So I suppose for me there's one expression always: the truth is somewhere in the middle. And that's more or less my life motto. So I have to kind of let things just be expressed. And that's what my channel is for. I get to express things, and it does me a lot of good each time. Also when I'm not really making all that much sense, or when I'm looking for clues still very much, and it's all very much pending, and it's much like halfway or 1/3 of the way into making sense of whatever it is, So on that note, I suppose I will leave you to your what you're doing. And thanks everybody who watches this, and who has been just generally part of the ride for on and off, just like me. I'm trying to have another YouTube free day. So far I have failed, more or less. Basically the idea is that I don't listen to bland, jazzy, or Tibetan bells type sound the whole of the day, because I get addicted to this type of constant entertainment. It's like the rose quartz. It kind of fills up the room. I hope you don't have that too much. That's my washing machine. It's going to be done in a bit. Thank you guys. Thank you for being here, and I will be speaking to you again very soon. See you soon. Bye bye.